not working in the old technical department, but hopefully she'll be able to join us at some point. This is our first Mindset and You interview, and today I've got with me Dr. Hazel Harrison, which I'm really excited about because we met only a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, and she's very kindly offered to come and have a chat with us today. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no worries. So would you just be able to talk a little bit about yourself, introduce who you are, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, so I'm Hazel Harrison. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I, at the moment, sort of do a few different projects, really, but all focused around how we can take care of our mental health and improve our well-being across sort of all ages, really. But my specialism is with children and young people.
Fantastic. So how did you get into this? Where did your journey start?
So I trained to become a clinical psychologist, and after that spent many years working with the NHS in sort of different settings, just sort of what we might call sort of mental health settings, and also working with young people who had autism. And I suppose I just really started to feel that there was a lot more that we could maybe do to share ideas about mental health with children and young people and their families. And so in the last few years, I set up Think Avalana as a way to try and do that and to get some of this info that we understand, particularly, ideas around growth mindset, around well-being, out to people so that hopefully they can use them and make it, something that is beneficial for them. And I suppose that's one of the things I always say is, like, whenever you hear people like me talking about mental health and well-being, is like there might be things that really resonate that you think, yeah, I'd like to try that in my family, or that really makes sense to me. And there'll probably also be things that just really don't feel like they fit. And I think it's really important that people know it's fine to take what's useful, leave what isn't useful, because it's definitely not a one size fits all when it comes to this sort of work. So.
And I know for me, about the age of 11 and 12, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a teacher. This is what I'm going to be. So where at your point in your career did you go, yeah, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist?
It's a good question. So I did psychology as an undergraduate, and I had some great lecturers and tutors that were really sort of supporting me through that. And they were really the ones who started to say, have you thought about this as a career? And this might work quite well for you and the things that you're interested in. And I think I never really thought that I would go on to sort of do a doctorate in clinical psychology. I don't really consider myself to be particularly academic, but it was really their encouragement. And I think probably their understanding of neuroplasticity and how our brains work, and me saying, I just don't really understand some of this stuff. And they were like, well, you just have to keep working at it, that was really, I suppose, some of the encouragement that I needed to kind of carry on with my studying, and my family, who've been, tremendously supportive in sort of trying to help me pick out things that I want to do that I feel meaningful for me. So
yeah, and is that you've sort of answered my next question, really, about where your passion comes from, and is it come from those lectures that you had all those years ago, or has there been something else?
Yeah,
really
no, totally. Like when I sit in psychology lectures, I just was getting so sort of fired up about it, really interested, and I wanted to learn more, and I was really geeky about it, and I wanted to go away and read more about it. And it was like really unfamiliar for me, because I was like, this is so unusual. This isn't how you normally respond to, work. So I suppose it was finding something that really resonated and really felt like I wanted to know more. And I continue to feel that way now, which is really lovely for me, that I just want to find out more about lots of things in relation to kind of what makes us human, and, what we can learn about ourselves.
And doesn't that make it much easier to get out of bed when you're absolutely passionate about what you do?
It really does. I mean, most of the time I'm quite happy to get to work. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so obviously myself and Liz, we are complete geeks about growth mindset and developing children's mindsets, and also adults' mindsets as well. Why do you think growth mindset is so important in children?
I mean, I guess what we've learned from the research over the last few years has been quite influential in making me understand that this could be really useful for us from a mental health perspective too. So, and I suppose we can expand it to not just thinking about growth mindset, but just mindsets in general. So when we talk about a mindset, what we're really talking about is a kind of cluster of beliefs that we hold that will influence how we act, how we feel about things, the emotions that we might experience in relation to some of those. And mindsets are sort of a shortcut that we develop, and we have them about all sorts of things. And they kind of mean that we don't have to keep processing information and going through the same things each time to go, how do I feel about this? They're kind of that snappy thing that means we just respond because we already have a mindset set up that tells us about it. And I think from a mental health perspective, what was quite interesting was when we started to teach children that you can change perhaps aspects of how your brain functions, you can change your mindsets about things. That can be quite influential for our treatment interventions too, so particularly around sort of anxiety and depression. So I think for me, I just became really excited about this idea that in teaching children about the fact that our brains can be quite malleable and they can change, and we can change what we believe, it can be really influential across a number of things. But particularly, I suppose, we talk about growth mindset, when we help children to understand that their skills and abilities aren't fixed, that they weren't born being able to do something or not, that we understand that our brain wires in relation to experience, then we can also start to help them understand that it's worth putting in effort and practicing things and trying again and taking on a challenge. And I think those are all the things that help us to keep learning and keep growing. So it feels, I think, quite important across a range of areas in our lives. Education is one, but I think it's bigger than that too.
Absolutely. It's really interesting you said about how when you teach them about the brain having neuroplasticity, that's like a game changer. And a lot of one of the sessions that we like to do with children is about neurons and how they fire and what happens in your brain when you're actually learning something new. And it's like you could hear a pin drop, because the children are just fascinated, thinking, oh my word, that's going on in my head, and they just can't almost comprehend that this is me, this is going in my head. And we often say, I'm going to put my x-ray glasses on now and I want to see your neurons firing, and they're like, oh wow, okay. And children sort of before those sessions almost have this sort of idea of, well, this is just me, this is who I am. I've always been told I'm good at maths, I've always been told I'm a good artist, or I'm a good footballer, and that's just the way I am. And they don't see the other possibilities of what they can do sometimes. So that's really interesting that you found that as well. Okay, so we were talking before we went on live that actually I feel particularly that growth mindset has had a bit of a bad press. Schools have had a go at it, and they've thought, well, it doesn't work, this isn't for us, it's hard work, we're saying all these things, we've got the lovely posters on the walls, but nothing's really changing. And that Carol's work is not right, it's just all made up mumbo jumbo. So what would you say about that, and why do you think it's had such a bad press?
I mean, I think, one of the really important things to remember is that it comes from a place of research. And when we continue to research it, we will learn new things. And I think Carol's such a great kind of, ambassador for that herself, in saying there were some things I thought about growth mindset at the start that we've done more research and we now understand are different. And we've got a new learning and a new understanding about it now. For example, that idea that maybe we were growth mindset or we were fixed mindset. And now she's sort of said more recently, actually, we're both. We were always both. We move in and out of these places depending on sorts of things that are going on in our lives. So I think sometimes, it's really important to remember that this is about research and we will keep learning new things. But the ways in which it can be implemented is quite broad too. And therefore you will get different results based on how it's being used. And I suppose for me, I'm less interested in the sort of increase in academic attainment. That doesn't sort of fire me up and get me so more excited than actually, what does this mean for children's lives and how they view themselves, and what does this mean for, you know, what they'll be willing to do in the future. And I think that it is effortful being, you know, using, even implementing growth mindset is effortful, and practicing being in a growth mindset space is effortful. And for many of us, we maybe need to reverse, or, you know, rewire our own brains in relation to it, to think about how we speak about things in a different way. And I know for me, that's been, you know, that's been sort of a few years of learning how to change some of my language to fit with some of these ideas, and to make sure I'm not reinforcing sort of fixed mindset attitudes. So I think there's a lot of things that will influence how well these can be implemented, and the diversity of outcome that you'll get in that. But I suppose, you know, we have to just remember that we're still learning, and we will continue to learn more about how to implement these sort of ideas in ways that will be sort of the most likely to have success. But it's not easy, you know.
No.
That's,
and I think there's the word success is viewed so differently between different people as well. You know, some people think success is down to having a nice car, or having a big house, or having the money. And actually, especially at the times like these, like we were saying, actually success is about being happy in yourself, being able to engage with other people, and it's those sort of life skills, really.
yeah.
Rather than the academics that you mentioned before. And that's one of the reasons why we became so passionate, because there was so much focus on academics in schools, and we were feeling that pressure as teachers. Ultimately, we pushed that pressure onto the children, and that for me was not what teaching was about anymore. Teaching was about preparing these children for the wider world, for when they get older, for when they experience failure, and when things go wrong, and how they respond to those things, and how we can try and build up what we call their bounce back ability to, you know,
Yeah.
it's okay, this has happened, I'm going to learn from it, let's get back up and let's carry on. So yeah, that's really interesting that we agree on that thing as well. Okay, so so sort of heading towards the end of our interview here now. So I'm looking, really, obviously we've talked about we're in unprecedented times as well, and things are difficult, not just for children at the moment, but also for parents as well. But I want us to think about well-being, because that's your bag. It's not just all about mindset, but it's the whole holistic approach to well-being. And what your 5 top tips would be, especially at this moment in time, but as we move forward into the future, that we could take away with us.
Okay, so I think first of all, one of the really helpful things is to define what we mean when we talk about well-being, and particularly with children. I think one of the easiest definitions to talk about is about feeling good and doing good, and that's how we kind of understand well-being. And some people think like well-being is about being happy all the time. Actually, having a kind of strong, you know, development of well-being means also understanding your emotional experiences at a range of times. And it's okay if we're not all sort of bouncing around at the moment saying this is lovely, you know. Clearly it's not. This is a massive challenge for lots of people, and well-being is about kind of understanding your emotional experiences too, and being able to articulate those and to kind of navigate those. So I think in terms of a really quick 5, one of the easiest models to think about is the one that the NHS have invested quite heavily into, and it comes from some of Nick Mark's research, and it's what they call the 5 ways to well-being. And so I'll talk you through them. So there's give, which is about making sure that we keep finding ways to be kind to others. There's so much science actually underneath that idea that it can really diminish our sort of anxiety and fears when we're doing things that help other people, and it helps us to feel connected. So which brings me on to number 2, which is connect. It's really hard to keep kids connected with their friends at the moment. I think we do have to use technology sometimes to enable that to happen. Lots of parents are getting stressed about how much time their kids are on screens. So just to say really quickly, the research doesn't support this is going to be damaging for them if they're using screens in a variety of ways, and particularly if they're using screens to connect with their friends, which is really important. So we've got give, we've got connect. Be active, you know, do Joe Wicks or whatever you can each day to keep your bodies moving. Do it with your kids if you can, or, you know, encourage them to keep doing little bursts of activity throughout the day, because that's really helpful for our mental health and our physical health. Keep learning. You know, we were talking about and working with the BBC Bite-sized project at the moment. There's so much resource available there, so check it out. There are the lessons that are on iPlayer, but also you know, on the Bite-sized website. I mean, there's so much learning to potential to have, and we know that our brains need to keep this newness, this novelty, this opportunity to learn. But also, like you said, it's not just about learning, you know, kind of history and geography and those things. It can be about learning some other life skills around the home, you know, whilst we're sort of in lockdown. And the last one is about taking notice. And really, this is about kind of moments of being able to pause and reflect. Some people might call that mindfulness. Some people call that prayer. It's just an opportunity to check in and to have a moment of calm and just to see where you're at. So give, connect, be active, keep learning, and take notice are the sort of 5 ways that we can all think about kind of taking care of our well-being at the moment. And they're all supported by a lot of science that says that they can be helpful to us.
Definitely. And I think the take notice one is one that I've sort of developed really during this pandemic, because I've had the time. Or now I'm hoping that I can build time into when things go back to normal, but I've had the time to really stop. And it was I was watching Stephen Fry on the BBC News the other day. It's about 3 weeks ago, and he suffers with anxiety and depression, and he was saying that, you know, just slowing things down. He was saying you're going to have so much time during the day where you would normally be busy. Just slow everything right down and just take time to appreciate the little things. And he was talking about when he cooks, he chops everything up and puts the peppers in one pot and the onions in another pot, and just really sort of takes time to appreciate what he was actually doing. And I thought that's a really good way of looking at it as well. Just, it's okay to take my time. I don't have to be rushing around all the time.
No, we're not like, yeah. And I think taking notice is also about kind of novelty as well. You can, you know, sitting somewhere different in your house, or if you have an outside space, just noticing, you know, you are going for your walk, noticing new things, seeing what you can spot that you wouldn't usually spot. And what you're really doing is bringing your mind to the present moment, so you can give it a break from thinking about what just happened or what's about to happen. And, you know, we know that that can be really helpful for us. So focusing on chopping the onions as you're chopping them, and, you know, not making it a race.
No, exactly. And it's nice just to feel that it isn't a race, that we can take our time and we can appreciate things, which is lovely, which is what this has provided that opportunity, I think, for us to do that. Now, you mentioned about you working with the BBC, and you've done your sessions on wellbeing, and they've gone down really, really well. And quite often we get teachers and parents saying to us, well, I want to start work on mindsets and I want to start doing this, but how? What are the steps that I follow? And that we often find it's a really difficult question to answer, because everybody's so different. But what would you suggest to somebody that's thinking, actually, I'm really interested in this, what do I need to do now? What would you suggest?
So I suppose the first thing I'd suggest is to start playing around with it yourself, you know, before you kind of sort of rush out and change everything else about everyone else. Just start playing around with what it means to you, and actually maybe challenging yourself with things that you believe you can't do, and exploring whether there's a way that you can improve, and just sort of testing out, I guess, the neuroplasticity theory yourself. Although we do have to remember that as we get older, our brains are a bit less malleable, which means we have to put in a bit more effort than we might have to if we were younger. But that doesn't mean we can't change how our brain functions, and there's so much neuroscience that shows that we can. So yeah, I think just playing around with some of those ideas yourself. You know, Carol's book is obviously brilliant, and there's a lot of resources online to just kind of start to explore. I think it can be really powerful to start to talk about mistakes and failures and what that actually means to you, and maybe you might notice that there are, you know, beliefs and mindsets that you have about failure that have come through your own life experiences that maybe need to just be thought about in a different way or looked at from a different perspective. So often we can feel, you know, shame and embarrassment about getting things wrong, and put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do things perfectly all the time. And I think exploring growth mindset also means you have to start exploring what it means when you get stuff wrong and how you make sense of that, and the sorts of conversations that you might have with other people around those. And that doesn't mean that getting stuff wrong isn't going to be painful anymore. It is. It still
Yeah.
really hurts, but you know, it's about sort of understanding what that means and what you do from that point, how you move forward, that it's not a signal that maybe you're never going to be able to do it, or that you're no good, or, you know, but actually just that you might need some more support or a different way around thinking about it.
Yeah, because if this is going to work for your children, or whoever it is that you're thinking about it would work for, it's got to work for you, hasn't it? And you sort of that role model as well, in
Yeah.
terms of showing how you are trying to develop your mindset, but also being open and honest about, well, actually, I've had these thoughts today, and they're more fixed mindset, and maybe even asking people for support and help, and how you could change or what you could have done differently, and sharing those experiences are just as important as trying to develop someone else's mindset, aren't they, really?
Yeah. And if you do start implementing this with your own children or in the classroom, wherever, you have to be ready for when their kids start giving you loads of feedback about how epically you're getting everything wrong. So
You know,
that has,
feedback for me is one of my triggers, really, and I've learned to really think about it carefully. And this week I've made some soup, and we dished it out, and I'd said to everybody, right, and just tell me what you think. My son was like, this is awesome, I love it. I love, you know, sick, as they like to say now. Where my daughter said, well, actually, it's all right with the bread, but on its own, I'm not so keen. I'm just like, I'm okay. I'm dealing with this. Okay, I'm embracing the
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah.
I'm not making that soup again. I'm going to try a red pepper soup next time and see if that has a better impact.
There you go. But also those are opportunities, aren't they, for you to go, okay,
Yeah.
what could we do to make it better next time? And but I think it is about modeling imperfection. You know, if you want to play around with growth mindset and start to think about what that means, it also means a massive amount of self-compassion,
Yeah.
and showing everyone that we are human and we will make so many mistakes throughout our daily lives,
Yeah.
and being kind to ourselves when that happens, and also being willing to learn from the stuff that goes really wrong,
Also
you know.
maybe have a laugh about it as well.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
didn't go
yeah.
so well, but it was quite funny. You know, being
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I burn stuff all the time when I'm cooking. It's a regular occurrence in our family because I know the science about multitasking, but I don't apply it with cooking. So I'm like, oh, I can do thousands of things and do this. But you know, it's an interesting one because I think it is an opportunity for people to give a bit of feedback about what they like and don't like, and you kind of, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. So, the future for you, obviously this is a strange time, but you said you're incredibly busy anyway. But where are we going next? What are the plans for you, Hazel?
Well, who knows? I don't really know. I think I'm really excited that the BBC have put wellbeing into their lesson schedule. And
Yeah,
I think that really shows a big shift for us, you know, nationally as well, in terms of what we're going to prioritize. And I do hope that as we come out of, you know, this really challenging and difficult and heartbreaking experience, I think we're going to need to think more about well-being and how we support those who've lost family and friends, and how we take care of each other. And I hope that I can get involved with some projects that will be putting that on their agenda. So yeah.
yeah. Well, I know they'd be greatly appreciated. It's been lovely to talk to you, Hazel. Thank you so much for coming on today. I'm
Lovely.
sorry you couldn't meet
Pleasure.
Liz, but hopefully there'll be another opportunity for us to do that in the future. But yeah, thank you for your input. It's been
Hi,
really
Liz.
yeah. Hi, Liz. But yeah, thank you so much, Hazel. It's been lovely. So
You're
we'll
welcome.
leave it there, and look forward to our next interview, which will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be speaking to Ben Cooper from Waggle Teaching. He's a teacher over in Dubai, and we'll be getting his thoughts on mindsets and how it works in his school. So we'll look forward to that interview. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.